You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly ReQua, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly ReQua. Today we're talking to one of our favorite vets, Dr. Laura Brown, owner of Green Tree Animal Hospital in Libertyville, Illinois, about spaying and neutering your pet and when is the best time to do that. Welcome, Laura.
Good morning, Polly.
So what are some of the medical benefits of spaying and neutering your pet? I know that with the females, obviously, will not bring more homeless animals into the world, but are there other benefits?
Sure, Polly. Traditionally, we have very much advocated spay and neuter, and we still do, mostly for keeping the unwanted pet population under control. But at the same time, because the shelters are still overrun and there are still lots of unwanted or unhomed pets out there. So that's probably the main reason we want to advocate spay and neuter, and nobody's changing that story. For health reasons, we want to spay and neuter. So spay is for girls, neuter for boys. For girl dogs, the benefits of spaying has helped. Historically, we know it decreases their risk for getting breast cancer.
Okay.
It decreases their risk for getting uterine infections, which is called pyometra. And so in girls, those are two pretty significant diseases that can be life-threatening. However, some new research is out that says potentially maybe, especially mostly for large breed dogs, there may be some benefit to letting these girl dogs go through one heat cycle instead of spaying them at puberty, which is 6 months.
And so, but that's kind of a pain, isn't it? I mean,
it is. So that's the side, letting a dog go through estrus or a heat cycle has disadvantages too. So girl dogs usually go through their first estrus or heat at around 6 to 9 months, depending on the breed. The large breed dog's a little later. And that looks like a dog that gets a very swollen vulva, girl parts, and they start to bleed. And the bleeding can be a lot or a little, and it can be messy, and the dogs can be distraught by that. They usually try and lick and clean themselves, but it goes on for up to 3 weeks. And that's the period of time that girl dogs are fertile. So that's when they are ovulating and when they can become pregnant. So, and that's a long period of time. And usually the first, about the 10th day of that is when they ovulate. So potentially, that's when the peak would be to keep them home and under lock and key. But nobody knows, and it can happen at any time. So that's the risk. If your female dog that's in heat gets out of the yard, runs down the street for 30 seconds, and there's a male dog in the neighborhood, they're in trouble, and now we have unwanted litter. So, and it's messy in your house, so pros and cons. Behavior-wise too, with hormones, this typically is more of a boy dog thing than a girl dog thing, but girl dogs' hormones do have behavior implications as far as being territorially aggressive and a little crabby and potentially some training issues there. We typically think about boy dogs that have hit puberty and have all this testosterone becoming a little more territorially aggressive, humping things, marking things, that sort of stuff. But girl dogs can do that too.
Okay.
So there's pros and cons, and the jury's still out on exactly the right thing to do. So I think every dog and pet owner needs to chat with their veterinarian about what works best for them.
And what is the cost to spay and neuter your pet?
So boy dogs are somewhere between, depending on the size and the time, and if that's all that's happening, somewhere between $350 and $450, depending on what part of the country you're in, I'm going to say.
Okay.
There is also, and girl dogs would be a little bit more expensive, and the whole process is different. Girl dogs have an incision in their abdomen, and we have to go into their abdomen and remove their ovaries and their uterus. And there's some new studies out that maybe we don't need to do that whole surgery and maybe just take their ovaries out and leave their uterus. So that's a whole nother podcast. So bigger surgery, they recover lots faster than women who get hysterectomies. So girl dogs somewhere between 400 and 600, depending on their size, I suppose, and depending on where you live in parts of the country. Cost is a little different.
Sure.
There's also a lot of spay and neuter clinics around the country. And we even have a spay and neuter program through Lake County here in our area. So people that may not be able to afford those prices can get subsidized spay and neuters.
And what's the recovery for a dog after being spayed or neutered?
A boy dog, all dogs have incisions that they need to be quiet. They are quiet for the first 24 hours on their own, and then after that it sometimes becomes a challenge to keep them quiet. But they need to be like leash walked and kept from over exercising and running and playing off the leash for up to 2 weeks till their incisions heal and their stitches come out. And sometimes that's the hard part, is keeping them quiet, because they bounce back really fast. Like, unlike women who have to not lift things for 6 weeks, girl dogs are usually back to normal within 2 to 3 days.
I know a lot of the rescues, when you adopt a dog, they'll already have the dog spayed and neutered. And I actually should probably put in the show notes where to find a local shelter that does spay and neuter at a discounted cost.
Yes. One of my friends owns only a spay and neuter clinic. That's all she does as a veterinarian. She does a little bit of wellness on the side, but her main job is she does like 10 or 15 spays and neuters, or maybe more, per day at a reduced price. And she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, and one of my girlfriends who lives in Evanston, she volunteers and will do it, every so months, a week, during a weekend, and spay and neuter.
So
okay, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the listeners?
I do. I want to say the one thing about the later spay and neuter for the big breed dogs is the research is out there thinking that maybe there's the benefit to not spaying as early as we have thought is prevention of some cancers, bone tumors, hemangiosarcomas, and potentially some benefit to orthopedic conditions to not spay so early. So that's really why the large breed dogs are targeted. Maybe less cruciate tears if they don't get spayed and neutered early. Maybe less hip dysplasia if they don't get spayed early. So that's the reasons that these new studies are out, is mostly cancer and orthopedic. So the jury's still out. Talk to your veterinarian about it based on your individual pet, what's best for your pet and your family.
And why would it affect only the large breed?
Because the large breed dogs are the ones that are most likely to get those cruciate tears and hip dysplasia anyway, just because they're big. Like the little poodles and pugs, they get different orthopedic issues like patellar luxations and things like that, but they aren't prone to ACL tears and hip dysplasia as much as the large breeds, just based on size.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today, and we hope that you'll be back.
You're welcome. Will do.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.